We are live with your AEW All Out review here at Post Wrestling. John Pollock and Wai Ting here with you to go through tonight's card from the Now Arena in Chicago, Illinois, featuring plastic bags, chains, thumbtacks, and hypodermic needles.
Yeah, can't forget some fluorescent light tubes. Saw that tonight. It's hard to describe this feeling. We're like minutes removed from that show and that match, and I still feel like my heart rate is sort of elevated, and I don't know. It's a really strange feeling, watching this, what is usually, I don't know, I don't even know how to describe it. I'm kind of at a loss for words.
Well, if you need time, we can give you, if you just want to
sit back. Let's start the show. Let's I'll come back in an hour.
When's good for you? Yeah. It's funny because I will say that I thought this pay-per-view was unbelievably great. But I think everyone's opinion of this show is going to be based off of that last match and what it did for you. It was almost as though everything else before it, like whether you thought that main event was just unbelievably great, that elevates your opinion of things. If it wasn't, it was just so much of the discussion is going to be on those 30 minutes on a show that I just thought was like they hit it out of the park. Like this was, I just thought like from the pay-per-view portion, I thought there was one match that did not deliver, and that was the card for me. I just thought this was one match after another, and these were just like consistent. Like each match was like this was just an incredible pay-per-view.
I haven't seen any reception to the show yet, nor that main event. So I'm maybe not as privy to like what the overall sort of reception is, but at least for myself,
I mean, it ended like 5 minutes ago, so we're not going to see too much.
At least for myself, I had very much the same opinion as you. Like, I'm coming out of this show not just really focused on the main event, but like thinking about the entire card. And I think typically AEW shows are really strong top to bottom. The only complaints that are consistent about them is that they are too long. And I didn't necessarily feel that about this one, and but I also skipped the 0 hour for the most part, so maybe that had a big part to do with it as well. But from top to bottom on the main card, I thought this was even stronger than your typical AEW output, where almost everything, was just like, at least for the first 2 hours, everything was quite incredible, actually.
Well, we're going to get into it because there's a lot to this show. They did load up the 0 hour, but I don't know what people's preferences are, but I'm kind of fine with just these 4 cold matches that are almost optional viewing. That is not going to be like, it's simply there. Like none of these shows were out there to steal the show, and they were just like, they were warm up pre-show matches that you're not going to be impacted if you skip the 0 hour. And to me, I was totally fine with that. We got 4 matches with 25 wrestlers.
Yeah, like announced when? Like last night or this morning?
We got the 3-way match was announced on Rampage, and the rest was all thrown together today.
Yeah. So, it's honestly, I was out with my family, realized I wasn't going to make it back in time. And, I knew that these weren't necessarily important matches anyway. Maybe for Ring of Honor, they might be important. Maybe a collision undercard, it might be important, but, they just kind of felt like they were your, almost like dark match type of warm-up match type of deals, just to kind of get some people on the card. Some good exposure out there for people like the Iron Savages that seem to get a really good reception. Beyond that, any like other big storyline elements to any of these matches?
As you mentioned that, I hope you had a wonderful evening. I'm glad you skipped 0 hour, but I was walking my kids home from school on Friday, and the crossing guard goes, "Have a great weekend." I say, "Same to you." And my oldest son just looks at me and says, "You don't get a weekend. You work every day." And I was like, oh man, there's a line that I feel I will have to address.
You might have to get your own retirement stipulation when your son turns 7.
I might have to make a promise.
Yeah, is he 7 yet? He is 7.
I know. Yes.
Oh no.
Yeah, actually, the same age as what's her name, Birdie. Well, tonight, WrestleTick's last number was 8,513. Tony Khan tweeted out 9,000 people. What's interesting is a week ago, this number was at about 6,500. So whether they got to 8,500, whether it was fully up to 9,000, regardless, like they moved 2,000 to 2,500 tickets pretty much in the last week. And I would imagine a lot of that moved. What do you attribute that last minute surge to?
I mean, it's got to be the closing angle from Wednesday that got so many people talking. It could have been that. I think it maybe a lot of people were just simply waiting till the last minute to get their tickets anyway. Maybe making a last minute decision about whether or not this card was worth going to. And I think the angle that they shot on Wednesday might have taken them over the edge.
I think that deserves the lion's share of it. Like that's like you're not seeing that kind of movement for an AEW pay-per-view typically. So the fact that we were just talking last night, like last year's All Out did around 9,800. And it just seemed like they were well beyond that. And if they end up at 9,000, even in that ballpark, given the relative, like especially the coldness of moving tickets for this company, even for a pay-per-view, at least the U.S. ones, I think that really does speak to that angle spurring on a lot of last-minute interest in this show. And will that be reflected in the buys? You have, number one, you are coming 2 weeks out of All In, but also this year you did have the package deal where a lot of people that bought All In would have got All Out as well. They did not have that option last year, and like last year, they came out of the gate, and I thought they had a kick-ass show following All In. Like last year's All Out, I remember just being outstanding.
But this year,
that was with 1 week removed.
This year, more so than last year, I thought they did a really great job of concurrently building this card while building All In at the same time. I think actually both shows had much better builds this year, both All In and All Out. So I think they managed to figure out like a real good way of pacing both shows so that both felt like they were substantially sort of relevant in terms of story and not just like matches being put together that you were watching. Like this show, I felt like I was getting satisfying conclusions to like storylines. It wasn't just it didn't just feel like a 2 week built type of show.
I'm told daily that this is a company with no stories. Are you telling me they built two pay-per-views up simultaneously?
I don't think that's that's an exaggerated criticism, obviously, but it's also not completely unwarranted, I guess, when you're comparing it to WWE, where I think every match might at least have like a backstage skit or something. Like this might be more of a product that doesn't necessarily need the I guess weeks of TV built in, often just kind of relies on like hot matches, like I would say the tag team match tonight did.
That was the one on this show, but I mean everything else, you could the four-way Continental was kind of tossed together. Everything else here, though, it was like they didn't just throw this card together. Like you did have a lot of build-up for everything, culminating with the main event. But the pre-show, we have Renee, Jarrett, and RJ City, and Nigel noting that the lights out match, it won't be for the faint of heart. I won't be out there. There will be blood, he proclaims. And Jarrett explains kind of in the old like territory system what the lights out match meant, where the promoter was not taking responsibility because it had reached such a hatred and so violent that they were not going to have any responsibility. And there was also the question asked of Nigel if he has any gas left in the tank, and he said his tank is full. Obviously talking about his car rental, and I guess that's how he got to the Now Arena.
Okay, yeah. That's good to know. You should always fill up before you return the car.
We're going to go really quickly through these four matches on the pre-show. The Acclaimed was out with Daddy Ass taking on the Iron Savages, who had Jack Jameson with them. And the MXM collection, we see them, their backs are towards the camera, and then they turn around to watch them in WWE vision with their shoulders, and Excalibur's worried about them straining their necks trying to watch the TVs like that.
I think in a short amount of time with like relatively limited TV appearances,
You really like these guys.
MXM collection, I think. I mean, I always suspected that there was a lot more talent in these two than WWE had ever given them credit for. And the moment that they got out, we saw like their immediate response to being let go, on essentially capitalizing on some of that value. Now, like I think both on the Indies and now within this AEW system, first on ROH and now on AEW proper. Like showing incredible charisma. I thought they had a wonderful web exclusive interview last night where like Mansoor says, House of Black, you might have defeated us, but we've won in life because beautiful people love us. They want to kiss us. Buddy Matthews, nobody attractive would ever want to kiss you, let alone anybody beautiful and hot and good looking.
Yeah, that was a good line. And then he made fun of Brody King's magic cards.
Yeah. I won't spoil it. They're very fun.
Yeah, don't ruin the web
great.
exclusive way. No. People want to enjoy that, pure unspoiled fashion. Honestly, I thought the Iron Savages were stood out more in this match to me. We had Bronson off the shoulders of Boulder with his splash, but the save is made, and then Boulder runs with a running cannonball with Bronson on his back and misses in the corner. Daddy Ass takes out Jack Jameson for the big pop, and then it's the arrival and mic drop to Bronson in 8 minutes and 8 seconds. Standard stuff. The Iron Savages did some cool double team stuff given their size. That was maybe the positive of the match. And they once again go to Mason and Mansoor in the back watching on. So focus on the Acclaimed and MXM collection over finger stuff.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dustin Rhodes, Sammy Guevara, and Hologram versus the premier athletes of Josh Woods, Tony Nese, and Arya Daivari. Sterling tries to lead everyone in a cheer of athletes rock as they all put their hands in the middle. Then they get the heat on Sammy Guevara early. Nese gets hit with Hologram's cross-body moonsault that Trevor Lee does, and then we get the first of multiple reads tonight from Excalibur, who notes that go sign up for DraftKings and answer the questions to win big. Answer questions such as, will the participants leave the cage tonight? Who is going to bleed first? And will gasoline be involved?
I hope you didn't take that bet.
Yeah, I think this is the same one John Anik has to read most weeks on the UFC broadcast.
Will gasoline be used? Yes. I mean, I actually think it's great to play into the ridiculousness of pro wrestling when you're trying to, blend in something like DraftKings. It gets people remembering, at least paying attention to the ad, and maybe even taking part in the thing.
What would happen with lighter fluid? Would that be contested?
That's a technicality that I guess would be interesting. Yeah, yes. I would consider that gas. Yeah.
So Rhodes comes in, he hit a Canadian Destroyer onto Tony Nese, and then we get a series of moonsaults and a cannonball with the baby faces to the floor, and Rhodes attempts the crossroads, but Mark Sterling distracts. Then Woods comes in, nails Hologram, he gets hit by the crossroads, but then Sterling distracts the referee, so Hologram and Guevara toss Sterling in, he takes a crossroads, and then it's an os cutter by Guevara and the final reckoning on Josh Woods in 9 minutes and 51 seconds. Fine match just for what it was. It was under 10 minutes. The audience, I think, was most into Dustin Rhodes, who they're positioning now. He's a double champion in Ring of Honor, and that's kind of it. Hologram, I would not say stood out like he has on some of his Collision appearances. I think you kind of this was him more just blending in rather than standing out. Juice Robinson and the Guns against the Dark Order. So Juice misses a cannonball, so Dark Order take over with a 3-on-1 attack, and Evil Uno hits something evil onto Austin Gunn, and then Colton is in and hit this great-looking dropkick. Got a lot of height on that. All 6 men are down, and then after Juice delivers jabs to Uno, he fakes him out, hits his DDT, and pins Evil Uno in 7 minutes and 37 seconds. At this point, where you're probably regretting that extra time with your family when I'm running all of this down, aren't I?
I had it on in the background, listening to the show as I was driving, and I mean,
nothing was bad, but nothing was like must see.
It's good to have in the background. I mean, if you want to pay attention to it, then great. Otherwise, if you're prepping your dinner, just making your snacks or vacuuming, seems like it'd be that level of interest.
Then we went to TikTok personalities Big Justice and AJ, the Costco guys. and they played a game of Boom and Doom. Big Justice was a former New Jersey indie worker, and I guess they become very popular on TikTok. Forgive me for not being as familiar with these influencers, but they were on the pre-show.
I know Scrump went to the show just to meet these two.
Did he? Yeah. Oh, you don't sound sarcastic either.
No, I wouldn't make that up. No.
Shivani then brings out Sky Blue on crutches, mentioning that 3 years ago, she was put into the Casino Battle Royal in this arena by Tony Khan. She broke her ankle last month, and she's asked about when she'll be back. And she says, well, I'm working hard, but it's just a waiting game. And she gets interrupted by Mariah May, who says she is out for her celebration, but has decided not to do it in Chicago. And says, why is this called the Windy City when no one here has ever been blown? And Sky pipes in, says, well, I'm sure you know something about that, Mariah. And May says that Sky Blue is just like Chicago, broke, filthy, and has to lower her standards to make it enjoyable. So Sky Blue responds, thanks, skank.
Yeah.
Dude, this segment was so bad.
Wasn't much I'll say, like, I mean, for as lowbrow as I think, nobody in Chicago has ever been blown type of joke was. At least I thought it was somewhat clever. Okay. Sky Blue just responding by calling her skank was...
Thanks, skank.
I don't know what sort of reception she was looking for, but she didn't really get any from it.
May just kicks her crutch out and goes to attack with the crutch when Queen Aminata comes out to help Sky Blue and chase off Mariah May. This just sucked.
Yeah, I gotta say, I've been kind of underwhelmed by this Mariah May post, all-in run. I mean, it's only been 2 weeks, and because she didn't really have a role for this pay-per-view, I think maybe that's some excuse that they might have for why they haven't necessarily given her much. But these sort of constant delays of this celebration, I just don't think are doing it for many people, and it's kind of taken down her momentum down, quite a bit in these 2 weeks. So let's see what they have. I would say as soon as Wednesday in order to try to pick things back up.
And then Top Flight and Action Andretti with Layla Gray taking on Shane Taylor, Lee Moriarty, and Beast Mortos, and the Undisputed Kingdoms, Roderick Strong, Matt Taven, and Mike Bennett. I would say this was the best of the 4 matches on the pre-show. They had the advantage on Dante for a while. Menard called him a big bald bastard, referring to Shane Taylor, I believe. It was Mike Bennett he called the big bald bastard. And Excalibur says, I don't know why his lack of hair would matter. And Menard explains, I don't know either, but it rhymed. And Excalibur corrects him and explains what alliteration is, which is what he had done. Yeah. Big bald bastard. The high points here is what I've isolated. Mortos looked really good in this match. He did a pop-up headbutt on Taven. Andretti hit his multiple Revolution DDT. And then after a blind tag by Roderick, Mortos lifts up Action Andretti for his powerbomb backbreaker. Strong hits him with a flying knee. He completes the backbreaker, but then Strong tosses out Mortos and steals the pin on Andretti. In 10 minutes and 53 seconds, they carry Roderick Strong as though he's just won the world championship. And he says, did you see that, Hook? I doubt Hook saw this. And that was the end of the pre-show.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do think these types of shows are worth watching to see who the sort of next in lines might be, and I do think there are some real standouts right now on this sort of undercard, or even from talking about ROH and a Dustin Rhodes, who I think is gaining a lot of momentum. Hologram, I guess, is somebody you can always look to see what they're going to do with them next. But Beast Mortos, I think, is gaining incredible receptions. To me, in my quick skim of the match, he seemed to completely steal it, and that's saying quite a lot for somebody who doesn't really cut promos and doesn't always appear on Dynamite, at least.
So then we go on to the main show, and the commentary would change throughout the night, but we start off with Excalibur, Nigel McGuinness, and Matt Menard sticking around for Daniel Garcia's match as he is taking on MJF, who is usually the designated pay-per-view opener. And that continued here with a near 24-minute match to open up things, and obviously a big focus was going to be on Daniel Garcia's neck that he's coming back from, and also going after the neck of MJF as he has promised to cripple him and take him out of wrestling for his ugly baby to ask about in future years. So there's your whole story. He's also bandaged up from the wine bottle attack on Wednesday's Dynamite. And so MJF is going after the neck, and he's giving the middle finger to the crowd, and Garcia counters a brainbuster, sending both over to the floor, and Garcia breaks the count and ends up hitting a spinning neckbreaker of his own to start attacking Garcia, or to attack MJF's neck. And MJF would bust him open, the first of several instances of blood on this show. And Garcia ends up blocking, fish hooking MJF, and hits a diving DDT off the buckle to MJF. And Garcia, at this point, he is covered in blood. And MJF spits at him, fires off elbows, and then he calls for the brainbuster, but Garcia stops it. And MJF, we go into this sequence of submissions where MJF applies the Boston Crab that they identify as the walls of Jericho, given his history with Jericho, and Garcia having his own history with Jericho. Then Garcia moves to the label lock, and both of them have their connections to Bryan Danielson. And then MJF grabs the neck, releases it, and applies the Dragon Tamer, and he wrenches back enough that MJF can transition to the Salt of the Earth. So this was a cool submission sequence that they have. Garcia collapses to avoid a second Panama Sunrise, but then he's playing possum for the jackknife cover, gets a 2 count, and then a front chancery is applied. He catches the arm of MJF before it goes down, and instead delivers a jumping pile driver, which this would have been an awesome finish, and MJF kicks out with the big near fall. MJF then prevents a pile driver off the turnbuckle by biting Garcia. He shoves Bryce away, and with Bryce's back turned, he kicks Garcia in the balls and cradles him in 23 minutes and 40 seconds to get the win. But the post-match sees MJF extend his hand, and Garcia shakes it, which would have been the dumbest way to end this. But of course, Garcia is already thinking ahead, because as MJF goes to attack, he catches him, and Menard is screaming, "Do it for your mother!" And he eyes the corner, spits in MJF's face, and hits the pile driver off the second turnbuckle and kisses MJF on the forehead in a role reversal from Wednesday as the neck collar is placed onto MJF. So he loses the match, but this post-match really did put the big shine onto Daniel Garcia, and they had an excellent match to kick off this paper.
Before I even get to talk about the match, I have to say, between several moments in this match to the post-match angle, this might have been the most mucusy match I've ever seen, at least on an AEW pay-per-view. The exchange of spit, the exchange of like snot that was coming out of like dudes' noses, at parts of this match. Oh God, it was, there are several times on this show you might have cringed, and I guess this was at least one of them. I thought this was an excellent match. The story and the character motivations I think these two had were really strong throughout the whole thing. And I especially in Garcia, who I think all throughout the feud, his motivation for revenge was, I think, felt really strongly in almost every moment that he appeared on camera. He just lived this character, I think, to a really strong degree. Within the match, you could believe that he was a guy who wanted to cripple MJF for what he tried to do to him in Buffalo. That said, I thought the match was, even though it was vicious and exhaustive, I also thought it was incredibly technical. I thought MJF's targeting of the neck was really strong. His offense was very aggressive and yet technical. That middle sequence of submission counters was very compelling, ending with what seemed to me like a Zack Sabre Jr. inspired type of double armbar, which this crowd actually seemed to buy into as a potential finish here. Garcia choosing to let go of the guillotine to hit the pile driver. I actually usually find that kind of hokey, but in this situation, I thought it served as a really good build-up to that jumping pile driver, which for him, given the storyline, felt very cathartic the moment he landed it. And I'm a fan of the finish. I thought, I think Garcia needed to come out of this with something, and you can definitely say coming out of it with the post-match angle, he does. But MJF also, I think, needed a win coming off of Wembley, and this managed to achieve almost all those things. So I thought they'd done a great job both with the build and also the execution of this match.
See, this was one where, on its own, I really have no complaints about the finish, but I think that this does underscore that if AEW, not to say you just completely eradicate low blow spots or stuff behind the referee's back. But if you did like just a handful of them, this comes with so much more heat that when you do something in a big match that means something like this, as opposed to it being such an out, and it's almost just like every single show you get something with the ref being distracted, that to me it's just become one of those like grown type of things that AEW does on such a consistent basis that it's almost just habit that you're kind of turned off by it. But I think if they did less of them, this is when you save it for something like this where it gets a bit more. It might be a little bit of nitpicking, but I thought it was a great match, and I really enjoyed the post-match with Daniel Garcia rather than he just gets caught and we just move on from there and follow it up in a week or two.
Garcia is the project coming out of this. MJF is already established. Garcia is the guy that you're looking to take to the next level, and I'm very curious to see what follow-up they have for this, because I think this kind of feels like he's done with MJF. Like he's even with MJF. You tried to cripple me, now I've tried to cripple you. And it seems like MJF should take some time off now, coming off of this, and also the Tiger Driver.
It's almost
91.
like Daniel Garcia inherits Ospreay's like Tiger Driver spot, is that MJF now has the neck that's damaged, and Garcia gets credited with the neck rather than the Tiger Driver from 2 weeks ago.
I really do think MJF needs to at least take 2 weeks off. Okay, can we afford that with MJF? Like shoot a video, from the hospital bed or something, but like sell the accumulation of both of these injuries for the sake of both the Tiger Driver 91 and now Daniel Garcia. So I'm curious to see like what they have to follow up with Garcia with, because he, in this feud with MJF, I think he's really taken himself to a next level. And I guess, like maybe we could look back at the Jericho-verse stuff as like something that maybe helped like put him on the map, we can say. But he needed to outgrow that dancing guy, and he's very successfully managed to do that.
Maybe he'll call this the Pile Driver 98 off the second turnbuckle.
Why 98?
Well, it's when Garcia was born.
Oh, okay, very good. Wow, he's a baby.
He's young. Swerve and Hangman have been surrounded by security in their separate dressing rooms, and they will not be released until it is time for the main event. Young Bucks against Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta. It was a pretty thrown-together match this week, and Nick's shoulder is taped, which they mentioned was a result of the All-Star 8-man tag last night. The challengers work on the groins of the Young Bucks early on, but that does not prevent Matt from coming back with a cannonball onto Yuta, and Excalibur is trying to get under Nigel's skin by stating that, Yuta really did put that ROH Pure title on the map, and Nigel's upset. And then moments later, Tony Schiavone repeats it again, and Nigel's getting upset. That was a fun spot. Yuta applies the cattle mutilation onto Matt, but Nick hits a swanton, breaking it up. And Claudio is consistently going for the giant swing, which seemed to be the spot every person in this arena just wanted to see in this match, was the giant swing. So they teased it. And after Nick comes off the top with a sunset flip, there's an EVP trigger onto Claudio, but Yuta makes the save. They super kick Claudio. Claudio then blocks the EVP trigger and suplexes the Bucks and does a long giant swing to Matt for the pop, but Matt manages to kick out. And then after Claudio hits a leaping uppercut to Matt, follows with a superplex, and Yuta comes off the top with a splash onto the knees of Matt, who quickly cradles Yuta as Nick holds on to Claudio, and Yuta eats the fall at 15 minutes and 45 seconds after Yuta got the pin on Saturday. He's the one to eat the pin here. On a lot of shows, this would be like one of your better matches, and I've got to say on this pay-per-view, this might be on the lower end of this pay-per-view portion of the lineup, and that is more so a credit to the match quality that we had here, because I thought this was a really solid tag match.
Yeah, I actually thought it was a really good match, and maybe I contrast it with my level of interest going into it. This was one of the matches on the pay-per-view with the least amount of build, not including, of course, the undercard matches. Like, they just basically made the challenge at the end of Dynamite, and here we are. But yet, in ring, you knew these 4 would deliver something worth watching, and they absolutely did. It was a great, fast-paced, like very creatively coordinated match. The Bucks have their style, and it was a lot of fun to see Claudio play within it. Claudio was the star to me in this match. Spectacular-looking offense. He did that like Shoryuken in the corner that I hoped to see become like a regular spot of his. Yuta I thought was great as well. You know, maybe I would even say Yuta's kind of underrated at this point because he's so overshadowed by the star power on his team. Yet he's incredibly consistent. And coming off of tonight's big angle, I hope to see him take a big step up because I think, you know, the BCC and especially Yuta is in sort of like need of like evolving to that next level. So I thought it was a really good tag match, certainly a worthy addition to the show.
And yeah, given where we'll get to with this angle, like this was kind of your last chance to do this match. We'll get to that afterwards. But this was very good. But the show was only going to get better because next is Will Ospreay and Pac for the International Championship. I am guessing that not everyone saw Rampage on Friday night. The last segment was a taped Will Ospreay promo, and it was awesome. Like this guy, it would sound ridiculous to call Will Ospreay most improved, but when it comes to most improved on promos, this guy is incredible. He did this whole story about how he followed Pac everywhere he went, from the British Indies to Japan. Everyone would say, you're great, but you're no Pac. And finally, I was able to lap you. And we had a draw back in Rev Pro. It was just this excellent promo that gave you everything that this guy has been like compared to Pac throughout his career. And beating him will be the symbolism that he has now become the British export on the worldwide scene that Pac has been previously.
They include clips of it, but that sounded fantastic.
Yeah, It was a really great promo on Rampage. So the crowd is on their feet at the start. They're treating this like a huge match at the start, and Ospreay is selling the injury from the Brainbuster on the equipment from Wednesday with this had to be the most kinesio tape on a pay-per-view in AEW history.
Mm-hmm. And different colors too.
Everyone had their distinctive colors. You know, in another era, it was like your streamers. Now it's your kinesio tape.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. So early on, Pac hits a Sky Twister press to the floor. Everyone cheers him. So then Ospreay one-ups him with his own. And we go to Ricochet watching the match backstage. And some of the highlights of this included Pac working the neck of Ospreay with a avalanche brainbuster. And then Ospreay comes back after selling for Pac with a leap off the barricade with his forearm. And Ospreay catches a moonsault by Pac off the top turnbuckle, but Pac swings into a spiked DDT and follows with a Liger bomb. This sequence was amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
It was just, to watch this was incredible. So he then boots Ospreay right in the back of his neck. But Ospreay comes back with the Os Cutter, hits another on the edge, but Pac lands a release German on the edge. And then it's the Poison Rana on the edge by Pac, rolls him in for the Brutalizer, and immediately they're calling back to Pac, beating Kenny Omega in this arena 5 years ago with that move at All Out. The Black Arrow lands on the knees. Ospreay tries for a cradle for a 2 count. And then after a snap Rana and a near fall, the crowd is on its feet chanting AEW. And another Poison Rana is delivered to Ospreay with the Brutalizer. He gets to the rope and hits a Poison Rana of his own, hits the Hidden Blade. Both shoulders are down, and Pac ends up breaking the cover. And then Ospreay is hit with a Poison Rana off the top turnbuckle, and the guy lands on his feet and hits this massive Hidden Blade, and Pac kicks out. The place is losing its mind. Avalanche Os Cutter.
I believe it was almost like a reverse of the Ibushi spot, right? Because the Ibushi spot from Wrestle Kingdom, where he lands on his feet, that famous shot, of course, that was a regular Rana, I'm thinking, because he landed back to back, right? This was a Poison Rana, which meant Ospreay landed facing him. I think. I mean, I could be mistaken, but anyway, impressive every time. Oh, was it so impressive that we've lost John Pollock from the stream? Oh no! This time John Pollock. Am I off or is John off? I'm not really sure here. So apologies, everybody. Let me know in the chat room, okay? We might be having some technical difficulties. Or John is just so stunned at this. Okay, there we go. So I think we can confirm that John was out. Apologies, everybody. This is some technical difficulties. I think he's just so exhausted, John, from the marvel of this particular match that we have to take a break and collect ourselves. So while we do that, how is the chat room doing today? Thank you, everybody. All 577 of you that are watching us live right now, whether it be on YouTube or on x.com/post wrestling or on Facebook. A lot of you guys are here watching us, maybe streaming the press conference in the background. Please don't switch. I guarantee you we'll be back right away. This was a great match. Let us know in the chat room, everybody. What was your match of the night? I'm assuming a lot of you guys are going to be picking this one. However, I think there are a number of candidates in terms of like what I was most impressed by. Yes, it would be this match, but I also think that there are other candidates to it. What was a match that you reacted to the most? I think that and question is maybe not as clear either. So I need to know what you guys thought about this particular show. A lot of highlights and maybe some lowlights as well that we'll be talking about. Somebody in the chat room is asking me where I got my t-shirt. This is a t-shirt about ramen, specifically cup noodle curry ramen that I got from Uniqlo. So yes. If we're doing an impromptu Q&A, I suppose we could do that here. But I'm trying to maybe stretch this out so we don't do the show before John gets back. I guess I could recap the match, but I also think that the show is much better when John is here, and I'll probably edit all this out from the audio version as well. John Pollock, are you back?
I don't know. Am I? All right.
You're back. You should have heard some of this vamping I was doing, talking about where I got my t-shirt. It was really quite the scene and exclusive for those of you watching us here at youtube.com/postwrestling.
Well,
let's pick up.
I'll have to re-listen for sure. Well, we were at the big spot where Ospreay landed on his feet from the Poison Rana. We got a hidden blade for a 2 count, and then after the Os cutter off the top and Stormbreaker gets countered with a Rana by Pac. So Ospreay turns into a Styles Clash, and then the final hidden blade from behind in 20 minutes and 37 seconds. Unbelievable match that these two had. And at this point, I was thinking, man, who's going to be in the spot that has to follow this? Jesus. Little did we know. This was unbelievable.
This was a masterpiece, and it was it showed you, I guess, the mastery of the two men that were involved in it. Because from the beginning, I think we all knew on this card this match was going to be special. But I will say my hype for it maybe wasn't as high as I think maybe it should have, seeing the result, because so much of this was overshadowed by. Whether it be Ospreay versus MJF at Wembley, or coming out of Wembley, Ospreay versus Ricochet. Almost felt like Pac was sort of like an afterthought. This fully steered the conversation back onto Pac and back onto certainly Will Ospreay as a contender, maybe the contender for Wrestler of the Year. What kind of surprised me about it though tonight was how much I think reverence Chicago was giving these two even before the match started. Before the bell even rang, they just saw these two in the ring and they were giving them a standing ovation. So they clearly recognized that this was going to be something special. They clearly had very high expectations for it, and I think these two exceeded those expectations. The sequences in this one were incredible. You're seeing two guys like flawlessly execute these things that like you might only dream about in video games, and they were doing it flawlessly. They were stacking counters on top of counters. Yes, there was a lot of like sort of like stiff head drop type of things here that you saw, but I think the most impressive things, the things I'll remember the most in this match, are the incredible acrobatics, like Pac countering the Cheeky Nandos, and then the Pac's moonsault that's caught by Ospreay, and then Ospreay goes for the running power slam, but it's countered into the satellite DDT, I should say. Like the smoothness that they executed all of that, it was incredible. I feel safe in saying that like this is probably a match of the year contender, but it's also I don't feel fully confident about that because of the output that we seem to get. But this, to me, in terms of my reactions, is kind of about the best you can get when it comes to like this style of professional wrestling. I don't imagine many people could ever do much better than these two.
Yeah, I thought I'd co-sign on all of that. Like the the level of complexity that they introduced and the precision at which they executed it was just it was so far above what you even could have anticipated. And they compacted it to like 20 minutes as well. Like you on this card, like this was not even, there were multiple matches that got longer time, but they got everything in, and we'll get to where things are going afterwards. But just a phenomenal match on a card that had a number of them. And that takes us to the next match, the Chicago Street Fight between Willow Nightingale and Kris Statlander, where they start off and they have a chair that reads, "New Jack, rest in peace." And that was our New Jack tribute. So these two come out and immediately they are just they go right into things, and there is no kind of like buffer period for this crowd. Like they came in with like a hardcore match, and the crowd was with it from the start. And Willow immediately hits a buckle bomb and a cannonball, and then it's Kris using the chair and power bombs Willow from the apron onto the desk, and this desk crashes, and the crowd is all with this at this point. Kris goes to the top and misses Willow with a swanton and shatters the table on the floor. But as she's coming down, like she smashes Willow with her leg coming down on top of this as Willow's like rolling out of the way. And this alone was like a huge spot at the beginning of this. So Willow gets up and pounces Kris through the barricade, and Kris recovers and sends Stokely to, quote, get the stuff from backstage as they fight up the ramp, and he brings out a trash can of weapons, including a barbed wire bat, which Willow ducks, and all of a sudden we see Willow with light tubes, which she attacks Kris Statlander with and busts her open and scares Stokely, who runs to the back and we would not see until the end of the match.
So usually like with light tubes, there's such a big spot. Like they're kind of like thumbtacks where like you kind of get double the reaction from them. First, from showing them off. Secondly, from actually using them. This was the first time I've seen like light tubes out of nowhere. Like you didn't see them coming. She hit them perfectly. And the first time you saw them was the crack over her head, and the spooky dust exploding everywhere. I thought it was wonderful.
So Statlander's all bloody. They're still on the stage, and she spears Willow off the stage, and they crash through the table. So this crowd's just going nuts. It's just one thing after the other. They make their way to the ring. Willow brings out a chain. Kris has a bag. And Willow grinds her in the face with the chain, starts biting Statlander, and then Kris reveals the thumbtacks inside of the bag. And Statlander comes at Willow, misses her with an axe kick, and lands on the tacks in the splits, which has to be like the most unique way I've ever seen tacks administered.
No, I don't think I've ever seen Mick Foley do this. I've never seen
Nick Gage did this a few times.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah,
sure. Jun Kasai might have attempted this once, but yeah, very impressive.
So great screen grab that Way got here. So she misses, goes into the tacks. Then Willow hits her with a DVD onto the tacks. They fight to the top. Statlander hits the one-woman Spanish fly, and then she grabs the chain and hits her with a lariat, finds a dog collar and ties it to Willow's wrist and hits her with lariats. They're both down on their knees. They're exhausted. And she manages the Saturday Night Fever, wraps the chain around Willow's face, and pulls back to get the submission at 14 minutes and 58 seconds. Ospreay and Pac is going to be my match of the show, but there is one thing that Will Ospreay and Pac could not do in their match, and that was follow Will Ospreay and Pac, which these two can take credit that they did, and they, like, we always talk about it. Well, who's going to follow this? And it's like this death spot. They managed it, and then some. These two killed it. This was a tremendous match. This was not gratuitous. This was not like weapons for the sake of it. They worked such a great hardcore match that escalated the violence. You had the story going into this. I was so impressed with this match. In some ways, like, I almost feel this was like the MVP match of the show, because there was no tougher spot for me on the show than following what they did.
Well, on a show with Pac versus Ospreay with the lights out match, you can make a convincing argument that this was match of the night because of what they had to, I think, compete against, and also because of, I think, just how impressive it ended up being coming out of the show. Yeah, like so much of the story of this particular match, it's like the legacy of this match, I think has to include the context in which it was presented on this particular show. It's an impressive match enough on its own, but knowing that it followed what it followed, I think especially makes it even more impressive. Now, what's fascinating to me is that a match that I always think about when it comes to like how you follow this sort of like emotional, incredibly gripping, captivating match that you've seen on a pay-per-view. I always think about WrestleMania 13 and the match that followed Bret Hart versus Steve Austin. It was the Legion of Doom and Ahmed Johnson.
It was a Chicago street fight.
Versus the Nation of Domination in a Chicago street fight.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
That's the key.
The key here, yes, have a Chicago street fight if you're ever going to follow
even if you're not in Chicago
match. Yeah, but what worked about that match so well for me, coming off of Austin versus Bret, which to me is the best WrestleMania match of all time, is that it was just like dudes hitting each other over the head with weapons, and it was incredibly like, I think, like, I don't know, there's something like, I just want to turn my brain off, like after watching something that, like, I don't know, like shot is so physically impressive or even storytelling impressive. I just want to turn my brain off and like see like visual sort of like stimulus. And this match took that idea and delivered visual stimulus in the form of this excellent Chicago street fight that just... what made this match work was how much these two were willing to commit to every stunt that they had planned. Now, it was incredibly well crafted. I think all the stunts that they had lined out, one after the other, really well designed, but it was like the ferocity and the pace at which they just went head first, literally, into almost every single one of those stunts that made it extra impressive. I had no idea, these two would be able to deliver this sort of quality, especially somebody that I think has such a smiling reputation like Willow Nightingale. She was vicious here, but it was Kris Statlander who's taken the bulk of this punishment in this match. And these two, like, I think delivered the match of their careers. I think this is one of my favorite women's matches that I've seen in AEW. And again, one of the big stories coming out of this, like, incredibly impressive lineup.
So this was a phenomenal match, worth multiple matches worth checking out, but this is going to be the near the top of a lot of people's list. Then we go on to the next match. Well, first we had Renee backstage with Will Ospreay and interviews him. He calls Pac one of the best high flyers and offers him a rematch anytime, and then turns his attention to Ricochet, who storms in, says, "You're talking mad shit," and he tells Ricochet, "Stop collecting a paycheck back here." I mean, the guy's been here literally 2 weeks, and he says to go out, pick up some wins, and then you can come talk to the champion. And Ricochet says, I've got him lined up. And I didn't know what they were arguing about. What were they so upset at each other over?
I felt it was a very forced way of trying to fabricate some sort of tension. And I don't think it really worked here, because the last we saw of these two, it was Ricochet helping Will Ospreay from Pac. I mean, Ospreay, even at these press conferences, which we're supposed to consider canon now, talks about how much of a friendship that they have. So all of a sudden, this argument coming out of nowhere just kind of felt very forced and not very, like, well designed. So and now, like, there are crazy expectations for Ospreay versus Ricochet, even higher than before, just given how impressive this Pac match was. So,
well, I actually think it's best that you have Ricochet at least have to go through a bit of a gauntlet. And, like, originally I was thinking maybe that's your Arthur Ashe Stadium show, and I think it's something more down the road that they're going to have Ricochet. I mean, get him. It's not like this guy blew everyone away in that Fletcher match, and maybe that's just, you can't judge off of like one match or anything, but maybe you have there's no higher bar than an Ospreay match and the guy who has the most history with him, and that's just going to be exaggerated by people that it's like, if this is not the greatest match of this generation, it's almost like a letdown to people. Like, that's how it's going to be treated. But this is certainly the match you have to get to at some point, and we'll see. Like, obviously it's coming, but the question is how long you hold it off for. Then we go on to the next match. Well, first we had Renee backstage with Will Ospreay and interviews him. He calls Pac one of the best high flyers and offers him a rematch anytime, and then turns his attention to Ricochet, who storms in, says, "You're talking mad shit," and he tells Ricochet, "Stop collecting a paycheck back here." And Ricochet says, "I've got him lined up." Kazuchika Okada, Orange Cassidy, Mark Briscoe, and Konosuke Takeshita for the Continental Championship. Taz is in for Nigel McGuinness. Very strong reaction for Takeshita. And we see early on Mark Briscoe and Orange Cassidy working together. And we get the Cactus Jack elbow by Briscoe and then a lighter elbow by Cassidy off the aprons. Everyone trades vertical suplexes, and it ends with Orange hitting Takeshita with one, and then Takeshita with a Tope Con Hero to Okada, and then Briscoe leaping off a chair with his own dive, and he cuts open his near his right eye, the same wound he had on Collision on Saturday. Cassidy and Briscoe finally go at it, and then Okada and Takeshita return, each hit the other with Germans, and Okada and Takeshita face off, and the crowd was buzzing for this interaction. And we briefly get it before Briscoe is in, and Okada hits the elbow onto Briscoe, middle finger Rainmaker pose, but Briscoe ducks the Rainmaker, and then Orange is in, and Takeshita shoves Cassidy into Briscoe, and Takeshita stops a stun dog, hits a bastard driver into a wheelbarrow suplex as the crowd is cheering on Takeshita, and Briscoe cuts off the power drive knee, hits a J driller, but Okada yanks Briscoe out to the floor. The closing sequence comes with Takeshita cutting off the Orange Punch, hitting his own version, and then a lariat and raging fire, which Okada prevents, throws Takeshita out of the ring, drop kicks him, and hits a Rainmaker to Briscoe, ducks the Orange Punch, and hits a Rainmaker to Cassidy as Okada retains in 15 minutes. Very fast-paced match for the 15 minutes, and it was just like boom, boom, boom. They just went nonstop for the 15, and I thought Orange Cassidy was kind of the glue of this whole thing, but the crowd was really into Takeshita. They very much want to see this match with Okada, and for that reason, I think it made the most sense to keep the title on Okada in this kind of setting, but that seems to be the match to build to with Takeshita.
Yeah. I thought it was a good, like, high-paced match that you might see on, like, a mid-card or the middle of a Dynamite. You know, very high quality, but I thought it fell short of expectations given, I think, the talent involved, and I think given how important it was for this match to, like, really build up Takeshita as, like, the next in line, a clear next in line for Okada's title. I think the story is clear enough that he's going to be, but I think Takeshita needed more of a standout type of breakout performance in this particular match. And I felt like that wealth was kind of spread, you know, between Mark Briscoe and Orange Cassidy. Again, everybody's a great wrestler, but Takeshita, just for the sake of what the purpose of this match was, needed to even stand out above the rest. And I don't necessarily think he did enough here to stand out. So I wish they crafted more moments for him. I think they did a good job overall of, like, maybe building to Okada and Takeshita's first interaction. But even that interaction didn't necessarily give us anything that special or that memorable. So, you know, the match is going to be good, of course, involving any of this talent. But I think in terms of, like, just my feeling about Takeshita coming out of this, it needed to be a little bit bigger.
Well, they did put the emphasis on Takeshita with Don Callis as they're eyeing Okada as he leaves with the belt. So they were leaving with that image of him eyeing Okada. Mercedes Moné and Hikaru Shida for the TBS Championship. Moné takes control early, and she's just wearing down Shida, applying a straitjacket, and Shida would throw her off her back and attack the lower back with a knee. And we get some dueling chants back and forth, and then Shida gets caught with the code breaker and a sunset powerbomb that sends her into the corner and is hit with the running double knees, and Moné kicks at her, hits the Three Amigos, and then a frog splash lands on Shida's knees. So Shida comes back with 3 consecutive Falcon arrows, and when she went for this cover, there was not a person in the Now Arena that was buying this as a potential outcome here. And I think that was the hardest thing here for, there was just nobody that saw Shida winning this match. And she calls for the katana, but instead Moné snaps the knee and hits a dragon screw, followed by a backstabber. Shida comes back with a German and a Shining Wizard and sets her up for another katana, and it's a really bad-looking katana. But Shivani, I think it was right on top of it and just explained, well, that's her knee has been worked on, and therefore it's affected the katana. But then she goes for a second katana, and she hits this one. This one looks good. And then she hits a third one, and the third one was really off too. Mm-hmm. And this was like a really key part of the match, and it was a real mess with these 3 consecutive katanas. And with that, Moné rolls to the floor. and they have a tug of war over the kendo stick. Moné gets pulled into the post, and then they bring it into the ring, and Hikaru Shida grabs the kendo stick, and she's going to attack Moné. And Aubrey is like telling her, that would not be smart. Like, don't do that. And Shida has to have a battle with herself, and she resists using the kendo stick. So she puts it down, then misses a Meteora, injuring her knee. The Moneymaker gets stopped, but then she chop blocks the knee and again goes for this Moneymaker, which is turning out to be a tough finisher for Mercedes, and wins the match in 16 minutes and 32 seconds. And Camille comes down to celebrate as they promote that Moné is 8-0. But I have to say, I thought this was the weakest match on the pay-per-view.
Yes, and I think it's a pretty clear one. You know, people are probably going to be a lot harder on this match than they would if it was on any other show. But the quality of this show and what preceded this match, it unfortunately will make this match almost feel like it was sort of like the fly ball that spoiled the no-hitter. You know, like, not to say like the matches prior were all outstanding, but they were all really good and of a certain standard. And this was, I think, the first clear match that had like some very obvious botches. And I would say like the least amount of heat in the building for really anything up until this point. And I you know, now we have to ask, like, what do we attribute that to? Well, I mean, it could be match placement. But at the same time, you would expect a star like Mercedes Moné to be able to overcome that sort of handicap. I think that's something we can place on her. There was no heat because there was little interest in the feud. Nobody could buy Shida as a challenger. Though we can also say Baker and Moné did have that build, did have that interest, yet in a similar position, it also received some of the lower reactions on the show. But then we get into the match itself, where I think there was a real lack of clear flow and narrative structure. I thought they could have relied more on Shida's knee injury to help them with that. I also think the lack of Camille, while I think, like, you know, is supposed to promote, hey, they're going to have a good, clean match, I actually think it kind of hurt the match, because I think this crowd needed one of those like attention grabbing types of moments in order to get them to snap them back into attention, whether it just be like somebody running in and the promise of like, hey, we're finally going to like ramp up and get to the finish here, or like some extra special element just to kind of like wake the crowd up. I thought this match was missing it. And in general, we do have to start asking more questions about Mercedes Moné, and like, has something been lacking about her in ring in this run? You know, like the heel turn, I think, has helped her really a lot, but she needs to take it to a new level. You know, for me, I think she's focused a lot on her in-ring quality, which I think you have to in AEW, but I think she needs to place some attention on the evolution of her character, which is, I think, what made her so exciting in the first place as a boss. You know, remember, like, where's her playing with the crowd, you know? Remember when she took Izzy's headband? That was the moment I remember the most of that match with Bayley. Like, where's that great heel improv that I think at some points you got to see from her? You know, now it's just, I think, more of a focus on quality of match, which is impressive, but you didn't even get that in this one. And that sort of like, you know, almost a trifecta of like things that kind of went wrong with this one. And it wasn't just Moné to blame. It was Shida, like with some of those missed katanas, which I don't really know how you'd explain, some ugly sunset bombs from Moné, and then to cap it off, another ugly Moné maker, which at this point she really should just abandon or rarely use. It's just a move with such a low rate of like, execution, perfect execution at least, that it should be abandoned or altered at least by this point.
Yeah, I think this one just, like, at the bare minimum, I just think it started off at such a lull, like with Mercedes getting the heat, and it's just like this long like rear chin lock choke deal. It's like, not to say like that's the killer, like you do want a match to like build and stuff, but I think that they put themselves almost at this low ebb, and it never got going after that, because once you kind of advanced some of the more demanding things in the match, they were just off on a lot of things, and it just they never got that gelling going with one another. So I mean, it's the second pay-per-view in a row, and it's like, the bar is super high. Like, there are no shows that have a bar as high as AEW pay-per-views. And that's just like, that's what you're going to be grading it against in another setting. people probably are going to be looking at this as one of the better matches on a show, but you can only compare it to the show you are a part of. And this ended up being one of the better pay-per-views this year and is probably going to get some nominations for pay-per-view of the year. So that's the bar. That's the bar on these shows. It's a very high one, and this one did not meet it. Bryan Danielson against Jack Perry for the AEW Championship in our final sanctioned match of the Nightway. Jack Perry got an entrance where he is on the run in the scapegoat bus as the police are after him. And we cut to Perry pulling up at the arena and walking out with the Young Bucks as he is joined by security in riot gear and got a lot of heat from the Chicago crowd. And we also
not as much as it sounded like it on that New Japan show. No, in my opinion,
it was a great atmosphere when he was walking out there and when the match began. But it wasn't as though this carried the match where it was this crazy heat and the crowd. They were singing every now and then sporadically the Crimea River, but yeah, it was not the Windy City Riot comparison.
Yeah, and just to kind of bring everybody back, that was, I think, like days removed from them airing the footage on Dynamite. So like that was just fresh on everybody's minds. It was Jack Perry appearing in Chicago, and it was sort of like, certainly the most significant moment he had a part of his New Japan run. But like, I think also the first time you got to see like main event potential as a heel for Jack Perry. I think they were crafting this setting, maybe anticipating a similar reaction, but you just kind of get the sense maybe we've been far enough removed from it all that like even Chicago's ready to just like.
Well, I saw comments online. Obviously I was not in the arena, but I saw comments of people like were trying to shut down any CM Punk chat. I think like a lot of the audience, like they do not want the CM Punk stuff at this point. Like it's just considered like you're messing with the show kind of vibe, and like you got you could, if you were listening for it, you could hear some CM Punk stuff, but very faint.
Mm-hmm. And it's not like they weren't directly trying to encourage it either. You didn't get Perry like really bringing up anything to do with.
No, they don't want CM Punk to be the focus here. They want to transfer that heat onto Jack Perry, and I think that's for the better. Like you don't want your main character to be CM Punk, which it did feel like for like a year of this guy, and in those months afterward. So Jim Ross is on commentary for the last two matches, and Danielson comes out to Europe, making this already a very expensive endeavor here and this Chicago crowd, when they heard Europe playing, it was like the opposite. Like last week we got the crowd popping for the highest grossing arena event, and this was a crowd popping like they spent this on us in Chicago. It's one thing for Wembley, but they spent it here at the Now Arena for us in Chicago. I mean, it was like thank you to AEW's unlimited commercial music fund. So anyway, we begin. The crowd is singing at the start, and they push that Jack Perry could end Bryan Danielson's career as they are kind of easing off the full-time caveat and just going with his career.
Let's see about that. I don't really anticipate that to stick.
No. They also explain how, due to the neck injury, Bryan Danielson has adjusted his training and his diet as well to accommodate.
Oh, interesting. I wonder what sort of foods help with I guess a broken neck.
Bananas.
But bananas are they part of the cure? Okay. Whatever has collagen. Yeah.
Pistachio, okay. I think, is great for the C4.
Pistachio? Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Early on, Danielson hits a springboard somersault dive. That's our first big spot of the show. And then Perry ends up with a draping DDT to the floor. I will say there were a lot of like neck injury stories on this show. Like everyone's got bad necks in this promotion, which maybe given the style, maybe that's a very believable through line for many people's injuries.
Well, I mean, think about it. Like what? At least two
MJF,
of them,
Garcia,
two of them have
Ospreay.
been hit. Two of them have been hit with the Tiger Driver 91. The other was hit with the pile driver from the second rope. And Will Ospreay, I guess, just
you sometimes just stumble into a brain buster on an equipment box. It happens.
Sure. Yeah.
So Danielson is then seated in a chair as Perry hits a running drop kick, sending him in the rail. That's going to require extra set of pistachios for that spot. And then Danielson comes in the ring, and he is just lighting this dude up with chops. And you can see him. He bridges from underneath, and he realizes his transition, he's not going to get what he's going for. And like that, he snaps into the label lock. It was a wonderful transition that he just did like right on the fly. And the announcers like put more attention on it. And Perry then gets to the snare trap, but transitions to the cattle mutilation before Danielson gets to his feet and takes 2 dragon suplexes. And the chops and kicks continue, and the Busaiku gets countered, and he gets the snare trap applied. Perry is yelling at Danielson, "Are you disappointed in me? You were supposed to help me." And Danielson rifles off a head kick and a running drop kick, but Perry pulls Bryce Remsburg in the way, so Bryce gets knocked down, and Danielson goes for the stomp. When the Bucks run in, they hit a TK driver onto Danielson when Claudio and Yuta, who were, at first you're thinking, man, were they late running down? And if that was an intentional detail of them being late, so Danielson ended up taking the TK driver, that's an amazing attention to detail. But they do eventually make their way in, and they chase the Bucks into the crowd, and we're left with Danielson and Perry. So Perry hits a running knee strike, Danielson kicks out, and then Perry goes to do the yes chant, but instead he's putting the middle finger in the air and runs at Danielson, and is caught with a Busaiku. And Perry survives, and Danielson just starts taking these slaps, and it's murder Bryan, because he just walks down Perry, eating slap after slap, and he fires off, rolling elbow, hits a German, but Perry lands on the feet, and Danielson ducks the running knee, hits the Busaiku, another near fall, and he stomps down Perry, hits a final Busaiku, as Perry, before taking it, goes all jacks on Sons of Anarchy right at the end. He puts the arms out way, and he eats the Busaiku, accepting his fate, and is pinned at 27 minutes and 54 seconds.
Yeah.
His career continues.
Oh, yes, I'm happy for that. Yeah, cool visual in the finish. I thought the match ended up in a strong place with some really great atmosphere and some really strong crowd reaction for Danielson, but I kind of felt like it took a while to get there. You know, I don't know if I sense the in-ring chemistry between Bryan and Perry that I do with Bryan's other opponents. It just never felt that strong to me, and maybe part of that is like due to the relative lack of story that they had heading into this match. I mean, the story is Perry pinned Bryan in Blood and Guts, and that was it. You know, like no other real extra grudge, and sometimes you don't need that much, but I think in order to like survive on this show, given the caliber of wrestling that we had seen up until that point, I don't think it would have hurt. I think it would have helped some of the reactions there. I never felt like Bryan's career being threatened was ever felt in any of the near falls. I actually kind of, by the end, felt like it was a good but somewhat standard match. You know, nothing that memorable or special about it in either action or story. Really strong near fall towards the end, but and it ended in a strong place, but not necessarily a match that I would say was bad, but also not one that I think was all that memorable for me either.
I thought, first of all, I think that this was such a tough spot. Like, there was no way you were going to be able to grab that emotional, like, could this be Danielson's last match on a 2-week turnaround with the first opponent, and it's Jack Perry. Like, that was, I don't know if you could have put any opponent in that role and it was going to be viable. So that said, I thought Jack Perry, I thought he worked a really great match here with Danielson. Like, I really enjoyed the match. This was not the match of the show, but for 28 minutes, I didn't find it dragged. And I thought that it was Jack Perry, you know, we saw the 4-way last year, and here, you know, he has not made it to that main event level, but I think he has made these incremental gains that I certainly see this guy as having that ability to get higher. Will he become a main event level star in AEW? I think the jury's still out. I'm not as strong on him as some others, but I thought they worked like a really good match here, where I think that if your level of interest came down to like the believability factor, then it was going to be hindered going in here with, you know, your first challenger in this series of matches for Danielson.
Yeah. I think the mark of these sort of matches that are very impossible is to just be able to see whether or not they can get a very convincing near fall. And I don't think I ever saw that from Jack Perry. You're right that, like, I think Perry is increasing in like small steps. But he's also now competing with several several wrestlers that should arguably be in that position that he's in. How is he going to justify that he deserves these opportunities in this spot? You know, being a part of the elite, having a match for the title with Bryan Danielson, being crowned TNT champion, when there are guys like, you know, Daniel Garcia, that Kyle Fletcher that are out there that are just like, in many people's eyes, I think a lot more organically deserving of a spot like that. So I do think like the pressure is on for Jack Perry to deliver.
Well, let's get to this angle afterwards because I want to circle back with a question about Jack Perry. Kill Switch appears in the ring and nails Danielson, and we get this moment of Kill Switch and Jack Perry temporarily reunited. And Christian Cage's music plays, and out come the patriarchy with the contract. And as Cage is approaching the ring, Jon Moxley, in his Bryan Danielson t-shirt, walks in front of the ring to block Cage from entering. And he is joined by Wheeler Yuta and the returning Claudio Castagnoli. And they all stand together along with Pac, who is with them. And we get, for the first time, the united front here of the BCC all on screen together with the original members, minus one particular WWE behind-the-scenes contributor. And Moxley scares off the patriarchy, who decide they are not going to be cashing in, and Moxley enters the ring. He hugs Bryan Danielson and gives him a kiss, and I love the fact that they did the hug and the kiss because I think everyone knew what was coming. This was the prelude to the breakup.
The moment you felt the linger of them not cutting to the back and seeing here, like you knew there was an angle.
And the Danielson smile, like he's just smiling, like, oh, they're all back together. This is great.
You knew this was the end.
Yeah, I liked it because it was like, you know what was coming, but you got to anticipate it. And as they pose together, Claudio nails him with an uppercut, and Danielson doesn't even like sell it. He goes down to his ass and he is shocked. He just can't believe it. It was such a different way to do this.
I don't mind this at all because I think sometimes shock.
Look at this guy in the front row. He had the same exact reaction.
Shock overwhelms your pain. In my mind, okay? To me, shock would overwhelm my pain receptors so that I wouldn't even have time to react to the pain that I'm feeling because I'm so shocked that one of my best friends has just suddenly attacked me.
I thought this. I really liked this. Like, I just thought it was a way better way to do it. But then what I did not expect is Jon Moxley to take us back to 1989, and he puts the plastic bag over Bryan Danielson's head and starts suffocating him in the plastic bag. And dude, Wheeler Yuta was the best in this angle because Pac is restraining him, and Yuta is watching Dad being destroyed. Dude, Yuta was so amazing. This might have been my favorite thing Yuta has done. Okay. Yeah. I thought he was so awesome here. Great. And this is the new badass BCC, the Bastard Combat Club. And Yuta is left with as the one guy to stay with Danielson is Yuta. And the one thing is the crowd starts chanting, "This is murder." And it's just one of those moments where it's like, you can, and I'll get into a bit of this in the next match we're going to get to, is that, man, you can do these heavy heat angles, but it's like a huge part of your audience today. It's like they are here for the entertainment and they are watching a show and they're going to have fun with this stuff. And that chant, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that's the reality of things, that in another era, this crowd would have been rioting in just disgust that their favorite babyface was attacked like this. And in this modern era, and this is something you can't go back in time to, like, it's let's have a cute chant for this really heavy duty angle.
I don't think it necessarily means that they don't enjoy the angle, enjoy what they're seeing, but maybe it does mean that they're not shocked, or they don't truly believe that they are witnessing somebody, be killed here in front of them, like they might have been in the past. And well,
in the next match, we're going to get to it where they were actually trying to kill each other.
Like I just don't know if that's even something you can mitigate these days. You know, like we all know we're watching the show and we're here to enjoy the show. We will pay money to watch the show, but to actually get us to suspend our disbelief that somebody is actually getting killed in front of our eyes, I don't think that's happening again. I will say I think what did take away my immersion a little bit was how long the entire ringside personnel just kind of let this go on. Like, it's one thing to have a house burning far away on video. You can't control that. But when a man is putting a bag over another man's head, and both of them are your employees, and you have security guards ringside, like, for, you know, like,
where were the guys with the riot gear with Jack Perry? They should have like had tasers or something.
Oh, they were private security. They weren't paid. But in my mind, I think at the very least, it would have been nice to have the announcers show enough concern that they would have walked out. And I think a perfect moment.
Oh, dude, you can't ignore. Jim Ross was like ready to call the police.
Jim Ross was the best person to call these last two
Jim
matches.
Ross was amazing. Okay? He was the exception of, like, he was not chanting "this is murder." This guy was ready to kill. Well, I thought Jim Ross was amazing here.
Well, why did Jim Ross step up and do something about it? Okay,
what was Jim Ross going to do to John Moxley?
Come on, listen, the man's he's recovered enough. Okay, let's get him. No, I was going to say the perfect spot for that would have been if Nigel got up and stopped it. Like, even this was too much for him, and he had to save Bryan from being killed.
If you had done the match with Danielson and that feud was in the rear view, that's a great, like, full circle moment for Nigel and Danielson. But I think you have to get, like, you can't do that now before
the match he's doing with Nigel is not going to be based on a grudge. It's going to be based on sentimentality. You know, at least
this man hates it. He hates him.
Yeah, but we all know that the warm and fuzzies are going to be there for that one. Anyway, well, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Ross is disgusted. He says, "This is not good pro wrestling to me. It's hideous. It's dangerous." And in my favorite line, who would incriminate themselves with a goddamn plastic bag? And for, like, everyone, I'm sure is at least now familiar with the angle, but this was famously done back in 1989. This was after the Great American Bash, where Ric Flair had come back after that pile driver attack by Terry Funk to beat him at the Bash that year. And then to get to the I Quit match, they shot this angle at the Clash of the Champions shortly after the Bash, almost to the day of this is almost the anniversary of this, and choked him or suffocated him with this bag. And this was such a controversial angle that they had to go on TV with Terry Funk to apologize because of the complaints they got for this angle. And this did lead to the I Quit match in November that year in New York. And as you may have seen as well, when Eddie Kingston was interviewed by The Ringer, he had stated he has pitched this multiple times to do this angle, and every time Tony Khan said no. And afterward, to this point, AEW tweeted out, "Due to the graphic nature of the attack on Bryan Danielson, we will not be sharing the footage. AEW does not condone such actions." And therefore, your only way that you are going to see this is by watching this pay-per-view, because they are not going to show this on TV. Not because I don't think they are allowed to, but I think this just adds to the severity of the angle to make it really serious, which I like the fact they went to this extreme of how heinous this was. But it was really tough to hear just the shock and disgust at this as we're getting ready for the angle, the match coming out of an arson on Wednesday.
I like the attention to detail. Okay, essentially, a tweet like that is sort of the parental advisory sticker on a rap CD, and just kind of makes you that much more curious. Listen, it was a really impactful angle. Okay, if you're gonna break the BCC up, or at least split Bryan from the BCC, I think you needed something big like this. I think Moxley did a good job of sort of weaving the tweener angle for the past 2 weeks, and finally giving us this confirmation that yes, he is now a bad guy, and giving us a confirmation in a big way. There's just something so incredibly visceral and awful about seeing somebody getting suffocated. It's very uncomfortable, and I would say if that was their intent, they achieved that here. And the divisions that we now have within this new BCC, I find very interesting. So we got Marina Shafir, Jon Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, and Pac. Now, what I also loved about it was that they never attacked Yuta. They simply held him back, and then they left him there, as if to say, like,
you have a choice.
Yeah, this is business, little boy. Like, let mom and dad deal with this. You're just gonna sit in the corner, and then, we'll kind of sort this out later. It kind of calls to like a pretty sophisticated story that I hope that they had for Wheeler Yuta coming out of this, which I'm excited for. The decision to make Claudio and Pac heels coming out of this, Pac especially coming out of the Ospreay match, I do kind of question, because I feel like he's like just started to gain so much momentum as a babyface that there's a bit more potential in it. But to turn him into a heel right away, let's see what they do with it. So we got some big matches for Bryan coming up. We got Bryan versus Mox, obviously. Bryan versus Claudio, Bryan versus Pac you could do. So
I think you got to do all these guys. Like, you have to do the BCC members at least. Like, Moxley should be the big one. My other question to you is, could you see like Jack Perry like slated into this group just based off that interaction they did with him and Moxley? Like, was that done for no reason?
What interact was there? Oh, Perry. Okay, interesting. But for him to go from the Elite to like a heel BCC kind of feels strange.
Like, doesn't this group kind of make the Elite kind of unnecessary?
Not necessarily. Like, I think the Elite are more of like your comedic, like, type of annoying bratty heels, whereas this is your, like we could argue about whether or not the company needs that, but the BCC are your serious heels. They're the ones that'll put a bag over your head. All right. More interesting, I think, to ask is where Darby Allin stands in all of this. Mox has been calling Darby Allin out. Not for a second do I think Darby is going to turn heel, because I just think that guy is going to be a babyface for quite a while. So can we expect him to side with Yuta and Bryan in whatever, they're doing?
And they could do something. They could take Darby out so he can't get his title shot. I mean, there's many options of what you can do there. I really like this angle, and importantly, they have a lot of different directions coming out of this as well.
Something tells me I don't think Bryan brought his kids to this one.
No, probably not. I don't know if they would have been having the time of their life ringside for this one.
Yeah.
And then it is the main event, the lights out steel cage match between Hangman Page and Swerve Strickland, where Swerve is wearing a picture of his home burning.
Yes, he
Imagine
was.
telling the seamstress that art direction you're going with. Like, okay, cool.
I kind of felt this like warranted maybe like a promo or something, just to kind of maybe help us bridge how he got from like crying about seeing his childhood home get burnt to now like kind of embracing the trauma as part of his fashion for the show. Like, we can kind of piece together exactly what it is. He's just like, okay, I'm using this as motivation. But I think like a promo would have been very powerful to hear coming off of that.
Well, it maybe was not as powerful as hearing from Swerve, but what we did get was Tony Schiavone reflecting on Wednesday's heinous actions by noting something that none of us did bring up. He said that, it was a nice house too that he burned down. And Jim Ross interjects and emphasizes what the house represents. It represents a memory. It was a sanctuary for his family. It doesn't matter how nice the house was. I think Jim Ross summarized it. Dude, I thought Jim Ross was awesome in trying to get across these angles. And as ridiculous as this is, like him just distilling it down to what this represented.
Jim Ross has a real talent for making things, or at least trying to like filter the ridiculousness of pro wrestling through like the lens of reality. And I guess he sometimes just good or bad, can't help but try to.
I thought he did a really good job on these two matches for when he was like called upon, and like his outrage over just like, and we'll get into it in this match. But I mean, this was as expected, one of the more violent matches you are going to see from a national promotion. I would say they certainly borrowed from some classic CZW here late in the match.
This was the official sequel. I know they had the three-way with Joe, but this was the official sequel to the Texas Death Match. Yeah.
We got the staple gun spots where they're just stapling each other's chests and backs, and Swerve is literally removing the staples while smiling. So they're bleeding from these staple wounds. And then Swerve takes a photo of his family and staples it to the chest of Hangman. and Page gets cut open by the head. He brings in barbed wire, and Swerve gets rammed into the cage, so he is busted open as well. And JR is getting disgusted at the violence, stating that it's getting hideous, and you don't take barbed wire class at wrestling school. Page doesn't have room.
I wonder if they do teach that now.
I would think that some more modern schools, I'm sure, are getting into the intricacies of barbed wire usage and cinder blocks. We should mention the structure of the cage was like right wrapping around the ring. So there was no room on the floor to venture out to, nor was there room for Hangman to execute a buckshot lariat when he tried as well. So they were very much contained to the ring itself, although they did start with weapons inside of the cage, which would just escalate of what was in the mystery bin. So we get some brutal chair shots by Swerve with more brutal ones to come, and he lawn darts Hangman into a chair set up in the corner, and then we bring out the best supporting actor for this particular match, the cinder block, which is placed right in the center of the ring, and Swerve takes Page and hits him with a vertebraker, and his lower back comes down onto the edge, and they zoom in on his back, and this, if they do cinder block class at wrestling school, I would be a lot more I would be a lot more assured, but this looked like just the worst thing in the world to be doing to someone's back.
A nice detail that I think they were doing was you had Swerve drop the cinder block onto the mat to show how heavy it was, to show this was not a worked.
There was no give on this cinder block. It just stayed in this position for the rest of the match.
Real cinder block. Cry me a river.
So this was just nasty with the vertebraker spot, and then he does a swerve stomp, putting Hangman through a table, and Page pulls out burnt wood, which was the remains of the house, which has been
splinter.
A splinter, yes. So he starts going to shank Swerve. He goes for the eye, channeling the Tully Magnum spot at in their I Quit match at Starrcade. And Swerve does what anyone with a splinter towards the eye, how you defend it, with an armbar attempt to take the weapon away and start stabbing Hangman.
Oh my God, they teach this in like a BJJ 101 class. Like this is like legit self-defense, what you would do with if somebody had a knife. Maybe not an armbar, but like this sort of thing.
Yep. Swerve then gets hold of the piece of wood, and he is brought to tears looking at what is left of his childhood home. And this momentary lapse in judgment leads to a low blow from Hangman, who powerbombs Swerve onto the cinder block, and Swerve kicks out. Swerve manages to recover and hits a house call that rocks Hangman's head into the cage, and then another in the center of the ring, but he kicks out. And Page is screaming at Swerve, "Beg for mercy!" And he's attacking him with the chair, and Swerve starts to laugh. So Hangman decides to escalate shit. He rips out the man's grill and then goes to the mystery bag. And what comes out of the party bag? That's a hypodermic needle. And he takes out this needle and he injects the needle into Swerve's mouth. So this needle, which is going to get us banned from Twitter, from YouTube for showing, is put right into Swerve's mouth here and jams it in, and then takes a chair and he winds up this chair and he just smashes Swerve in the head, which they do cut as the chair is connecting with the head. And
I kind of missed the impact, unfortunately, on the live broadcast.
And that totally might have just been a production error. I could also see it almost being like on purpose, that it's not going to be this GIF that is easily repeatable for people to see just how brutal this chair shot was. But maybe I'm giving too much thought to this. And with that chair shot, the match is called off at 31 minutes and 23 seconds. Jim Ross proclaims, "Thank God it's over." And Taz, who has literally seen this man jammed with a needle in the mouth, all he can focus on is how sick that chair shot was. He seemed genuinely uncomfortable from this chair shot and what he had seen. That I'm sure there are going to be people that are going to say, listen, if you're going to have a chair shot in wrestling, an unprotected one, at least this is...
Well, hold on a second. we've seen plenty of times AEW use unprotected chair shots that were worked. Sean Spears famously, that the one that went wrong, and then like most recently too. So like I'm not convinced that what we saw tonight was a real chair shot.
I would certainly argue that whatever you are doing with a chair, you are still delivering trauma to the head at the very least.
So you are with a trash can, you are with like a cookie sheet, and those are like still, I guess, not necessarily banned. Or
it's
even
headshots. It's like it's headshots.
Every bump is a headshot when you want to be technical about it. Like I mean, I'm a bit surprised that like people are reacting that way to this particular chair shot when we've seen these sort of chair shots, like worked, gimmicked chair shots in AEW before.
I will give you a work chair shot, and we'll see how well they hold up.
Okay, sure.
So the match ends. First of all, what did you think about the match overall?
I think these two had a lot to live up to. They didn't just have to meet the expectations of the Texas Death Match. They had to live up to the hype of this house burning angle that just kind of set expectations that much higher now. How is a guy going to come back when somebody else this man has burned down his childhood home is the answer that they had to give. And you could tell how tough that was the moment that they pulled out the staple guns, and that was just a warm-up act to this match. I don't know if the overall, like, I don't know if this match was like as impactful as a Texas Death Match. I think that one was like truly shocking, but this lived up to it. It was a very worthy sequel, and it made me cringe several times. Now the cage setting, I don't know if the cage setting like necessarily helped them out so much. I almost feel like it kind of more hindered them because this essentially was more of a Texas Death Match, like similar to the Texas Death Match. But like in saying that, what was going to kind of make this match feel like it was a sequel to the prior one was the stunts that they were going to pull out, was the amount of like, this is like the horror movie equivalent in a professional wrestling match. And I thought they were looking for things to shock you, looking for things that were going to make you remember, and looking for things that would make you feel uncomfortable. The cinder blocks I thought worked massively well. I'm sure it did not feel very good if they were in fact real cinder blocks. What I was maybe most impressed by was the burnt piece of wood. It was probably one of the safest things that I think they've ever used in this feud, this like piece of wood. But because of the symbolism attached to the burnt house, and also because it looks like it's a guy stabbing somebody else with a knife, it created tremendous reactions that I think made for one of the most memorable parts of the match. And then, of course, they had to find a way to create a spot gruesome enough to close this entire thing out, and they came up with it in the form of this hypo what?
Hypodermic needle.
Hypodermic needle. Yeah. To me, did Terry Funk ever try this? This might have been a first.
TBS did not give the go-ahead to this in '89. This was the backup in case the plastic bag fell through.
Yeah, it would have. It was going to take a lot to shock this crowd after seeing the plastic bag asphyxiation, and they came up with, I think, the spot. This did the trick. I felt this was a very satisfying, worthy follow-up to the Texas Death Match. And
imagine they flipped this and they did this to Danielson, and Hangman got the plastic bag.
Oh my God. Now, what if it's revealed later on? Do we know if this syringe was filled with something? Like, how evil would that be? Okay.
That's why you tune into the follow-up TV.
Oh my God.
What
did he
the man was injected with. I mean, he went off the air unconscious, so we're left to believe. I mean, maybe he was, who knows? Yeah, I don't think this was at the level of the Texas Death Match, but to your point, I think anyone that wanted like the big follow-up, like they promised you one of the most violent matches that they could put together, and I think they gave you that. I watch it and I'm kind of torn that, we look at this, that it just seems as though for these types of matches, it's going to more and more lengths to show you how these guys are really going to harm one another and come up with the craziest shit. And during this match, like, you're hearing that this is awesome, we want fire. It's like your audience is screaming at you like, we're here for a show and we're going to they're just here to like entertain you and tell you like, we don't view this as like real. But the other side of the coin is going so far to tell your audience, look, this is real, what we're doing. And that's kind of the where you have to go to now to get to this audience so that they take something as truly gruesome.
I mean, I'm trying to think what they could possibly do to get the audience to think that what they were doing within the confines of this television show, within these ropes, was real. Like other than, I don't know, like a screw job type of scenario, like that's how you would achieve that. Like other than that, I think anything else that would take place is going to be seen as part of the show, is going to be seen as a sort of like, product of this audience's entertainment and enjoyment. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that type of reaction.
It's not. It's like that's where things are at this point, and it's. I think it all comes down to your thought process of just how far you go here, where guys are just gonna like massacre each other to just escalate the bar more and more, and you have to go beyond this each time. And it's not the idea of the illusion of violence. Now it's just the actual delivery of real violence and real.
Okay, let's debate that, because what was really violent about this match?
The cinder blocks.
The cinder blocks and the landing on the cinder blocks, right?
Yeah,
I don't disagree, but I think on the scale of risk, that's pretty high up there. But it's also not like the craziest thing I've seen in wrestling. Like, it's shocking because I haven't seen a cinder block vertebreaker before. But I also like
the Darby stuff, like the Darby stuff is like all examples of
Darby
that stuff.
Frequently, I think, like sets the bar probably too high. Again, I think like what stands out to me the most are going to be the things that are also storyline driven, like the burnt piece of wood, which was completely safe, but also I think garnered some of the biggest reactions. The hypodermic,
and it also, just on that note, for that spot, people in the arena probably had no idea the significance of it, but you don't need the significance to just see the guy stabbing him with an object, and that works on that level. And if you happen to go home and watch the show, you're like, oh, there was even deeper meaning than just a very like a sharp object. I can understand he's trying to stab him. I don't need the story.
Yes. And the hypodermic needle, which
I think everyone understands that one.
Yeah. It is incredibly shocking because
they come home to the pay-per-view and realize, oh my God, that was his old needle collection. There was a sentimental attachment to those needles too.
Yeah, I don't know.
There's a backstory.
I don't know if there needs to be much explanation for the backstory for this one, but it's shocking because we've never seen a needle used in pro wrestling before. We are witnessing
at this
essentially,
level. At this
level. Yeah. But all we're talking about is a spot that we've all taken, John. If you've ever been to the dentist, you've taken this spot, right? Okay, and so this is relatively safe, but high on the reaction level. And I think ultimately in pro wrestling, you're looking for these things. These things are kind of perfect, like enough to elicit big reaction to let people think that it was a lot more painful and a lot more gruesome than it actually was.
I look more towards like the cinder block spots and such like that. But it was,
very high risk. Yes,
it was very high risk. But overall,
but maybe there's an artistry to that we don't know about.
I don't know if they invented that tonight, but we shall see. Overall, I thought this was a phenomenal pay-per-view. I thought that they really came out of the gate and put together an excellent show that I think you would be hard-pressed to come up with too many negatives on the pay-per-view portion of this outside of the women's title match that I think disappointed. But I can't say I was disappointed with any of the other matches. The main event is not really my cup of tea, but it certainly is, like, that's the match this needed to be. And I think for that reason, like it achieved what it needed to be, and I also like the outcome. I think that Hangman winning this sets up a lot for him to go forward. And Danielson has like a dozen opponents, pretty much. If you want to include Hangman and Zack Sabre Jr. and everyone on the new BCC, like there is no shortage of people for him to work with, and a Nigel that you could throw it. Like there's no shortage of opponents, and I don't think he's going to get to all of these people.
Yeah. I think coming out of this show, like Hangman is an incredibly hot commodity in the company right now. And whether or not you like escalate him into a title picture right away, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, do you strike while the timing is hot, or like do you kind of wait until there's a more opportune time where Danielson kind of has his own track going on, and like you feud with Paige maybe. But obviously, like Ospreay and Pac both come out of this, I think, incredibly like with a lot of buzz attached to them. Willow, Nightingale, and Kris Statlander should be coming out of this like the hottest that they've ever been, and so that's why I think the follow up.
I love that match. Like for all I say about like I thought that match was tremendous. Like I knew they were gonna have a really good match together, as I said last night, and that exceeded my expectations. And that was without any knowledge of what they would have to follow. Like one of the better matches of the year. I have no problem saying that in Pac and Ospreay, which was my match of the show. But they came out. I was so impressed with like what they did in those 15 minutes, and I think that really does tell you that you can be in an awful match placement. It doesn't mean that you can't follow it up. Maybe it has to be a Chicago street fight.
But, if you have light tubes, if you have like all these things, I think it helps at least. Like if they came out doing a technical match, I don't know if it would have been the same. But to their credit, like God, did they have a great match? Daniel Garcia
and a great crowd. Like let's give them credit too. Like this was an awesome crowd at the start of Willow and Kris. It's not like that. Like the crowd had a lull. They were in it at the start, and this was an awesome crowd for tonight's show.
And I think even for a match like Moné versus Shida, I think you could tell they were trying. Like people were wanting.
They did the dueling chants, and it wasn't like they were sitting on their hands for the whole thing.
Yeah. Daniel Garcia also comes out of this, I think, with, the biggest sort of spotlight he's had in his career. So I didn't think coming off of Wembley so soon that we would be so like excited talking about All Out. But like when you compare the two, All In was a great show. Maybe to some, like to Tony Khan, the greatest show that they've ever done. But I think I feel like this was a better show. Like, and that's just to tell you how good this one was, just in terms of like what we were able to talk about.
Could you have more of a contrast of the feel good ending of All In to this massacre to end All Out? Like this is like
asphyxiation and the hypodermic needle. Yeah, it was quite the 2 weeks. Yeah.
All right, let's zip through feedback because we're getting super late on the East Coast here as we are approaching 2 a.m.
Yeah. A lot to talk about on this one. Thank you, all 830 people that are watching us live now. Do us a favor, help us on the YouTube get to 18,000 people. I think we're only 20, 30, maybe 40 people away. If only 40 of the 830 people right now click subscribe on our YouTube channel, we would achieve our goal tonight. And boy, would you want to see the celebration if that happens. Plastic bags for everybody. Let's go to our call here. Let's go to Muggin. Muggin, welcome to the show. What did you think of All Out?
Yeah, Hangman really let it all out at the end. I had to work it in there. I had to. Okay, I was expecting all kinds of depravity in this main event, and I know those two deranged motherfuckers were gonna do something nuts, but the needle really put it over the top. I could do without the unprotected chair shot. I mean, I don't care if it's gimmick or not. It's just, there's no place for that. And I will give the guys, the production team credit for pulling away just as soon as Heyman hit the chair on Swerve's head. And I feel like Heyman needed this win because this because they need to put an end to this rivalry for now. And I feel like Heyman is sending up the card again as a heel, and because he was both. I thought both men delivered, and even though the level of blood wasn't as a level as the Texas Death Match.
This one didn't this was just about the the shock of the violence, and I don't think you had some blood, but I don't think you needed a bloodbath in this at this point. You did the bloodbath. I mean. And they'll probably have future ones.
The fact that it was under lights out rules. I thought the fact it was under lights out rules. I thought maybe they would go even further, but but in that aspect they played it safe. But I was satisfied with what I got.
I love that your conclusion was they played it safe in this particular presentation.
Well, because
DraftKings did tease us with gasoline, so I guess that person, whoever voted on that, did not cash in tonight.
Because again, trying to match or trying to surpass that Texas Death Match at Full Gear last year was impossible. But I thought both Swerve and Hangman really came through and tried to match it. And another thing also, I wasn't too hot about MJF and Garcia because Garcia should have won. He should have won.
You can argue he he won the feud, perhaps by or at least got his revenge.
I mean, like, does anybody here see a rematch in Grand Slam? Because I mean, the match was great. The match was good, but the low blow finish really soured it for me.
I kind of.
I mean, the whole thing was about Garcia. This wasn't about like MJF. Like he gets the win, but it was I understand that thinking, but I would say that the post match to me almost like overshadowed the end of the match. I can see people being critical of that. It almost makes the outcome unnecessary. But I think Daniel Garcia. I just think he had a tremendous promo on Wednesday, really the last two shows of Dynamite, and then a phenomenal match tonight. And the angle was all about Garcia getting his comeuppance on MJF at the end. And I think he's in a real good place going forward. Like we don't know what his status is. If that guy is not signed, are you telling me there is more or less interest in a Daniel Garcia on
I can't buy that he's not signed. I don't think they would give him that.
I wouldn't be putting him in this position either, but like just to tell you, like if you were like, let's say you missed out on a Daniel Garcia, I think like you've seen an aspect of him these last few weeks that I don't think a lot of people pegged him as being like this good of a promo and somebody that you really do see building to ascend to that next level.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Muggin, for that call. Let's go to some of our super chats here. First of all, welcome Matt JH, who's a new member of our YouTube channel.
Hello, Matt.
You can join as a member of the YouTube channel where you can get our exclusive content there, or better value is to go to patreon.com/postwrestling where you get an audio feed as well, in addition to some video. But a lot of you just prefer the YouTube platform, and that's perfectly fine too. So thank you, Matt, for being a member. Tom Mohegan sends us $2 to say, why does AEW struggle when they return to the city?
I mean, that's a larger question. I mean, I would not call tonight if they were at 9,000 people. Like it's down from last year by about 800, but like that's a really strong number.
Wasn't today considered a sellout, according to? Am I thinking?
I mean, they fit more people in last year, so I don't know. Like their configuration was probably different, but I mean, it was not the capacity of the Now Arena. But I mean, 9,000 for any company in the US, that's a great number. But I think, Tom, on a larger scale, I mean, it's a product that you can come up with all your reasonings for. Like it's one that there was certainly last minute interest in this show, but now we can look ahead to some of these TVs and Arthur Ashe Stadium, and like they are having a very difficult time moving tickets at a volume in like just what they were doing a year ago. And that's an overall feeling of the product. And I think you can look of two ways, that it's very, you can be of the mindset that there are issues to correct from within. And then there's external pressures of, you have a WWE that is red hot at the moment, and you are like the number 2 brand. And I think that there's probably a mixture to both that is impacting them. But, you watch a show like this and it feels like you have all of this momentum coming out of these shows, but sometimes that really doesn't carry over to the TV and move tickets.
No, wasn't like the All In follow-up Dynamite evidence of that?
Yeah, in Champaign. Yeah, that was like a really bad crowd that they had in Champaign. And it's, that
like even with ratings, like was it any significantly different pattern?
They did not get a boost coming off of that show.
Yeah. So, but buy rates I think do account for a whole lot, and we'll see how this one did. Let's go to Shindangans, who sends $2 to say, can we call him Cardio Castagnoli going forward? You can.
Sure. Maybe.
Yeah, feel free.
Yeah. You be the one. Yeah. Design that T-shirt.
Thank you very much for that super chat. Let's go to Lady B, who sends $10. Thank you, Lady B, for the support. Lady B says, love your content. I watched tonight's show with a group of girlfriends and we were so uncomfortable during the main event. I'm just curious how AEW prioritized its female audience. Yeah. I think the valid criticism.
I'll say though, I hate like the stereotyping though, that like violent stuff is like that there aren't females that enjoy that. Like I'm a male viewer and that is not my cup of tea at all. Like I'm not interested in that, but there's lots of people that do enjoy that type of thing. I think there's a limit to how far you go, and that I think
what's that limit?
Well, we haven't reached that limit yet, but they're bound and determined to find it.
Yeah.
But
again, to me, like I think pro wrestling is an art form that has many sort of subgenres, and AEW is one of those platforms that's there to kind of present to you the variety show, showcasing the best of all of those genres. And one of those genres is horror, deathmatch wrestling, and maybe it just kind of requires a little bit of explaining to your friends that, hey, what we're about to watch, you kind of have to watch through the lens of a horror movie, and that's how.
And let's be honest, in this world where there are less, when you started in 2019, you could make up a really long list of things WWE was not going to do or were not satisfying their audience with, and that list has shortened. But the type of match you saw tonight with Hangman Page and Swerve Strickland, you are not going to see that in a WWE ring. That's somewhere where, for a national promotion, like not a big Japan or not like an independent or a GCW show, a national company on pay-per-view, AEW is the company that can do that type of a match that you're not going to see in WWE.
Yeah. Thank you very much for raising the topic. I'm curious to know if other people have any thoughts on that. Just some notes on the press conference. Apparently, this was the shortest press conference that they've ever had. No wrestlers appeared, and only Tony Khan fielded questions for 15 minutes.
Yeah, and the key stuff, like as he said in front of the crowd in Chicago last night and seemed to reiterate tonight, is that, he is talking as confident as ever about a pending TV deal. And I have not seen it, but yeah, the headline here from Neil Flanagan is that Tony Khan stated there's a 90% chance of an announcement of a media rights deal within the next month. And he has repeated the fact, like, he believes, they will be sticking around on TNT and TBS for a long time. So that seems to be, this is as strong of an indication from Tony Khan, from his football analogies of, I think they've gone from the red zone to the 1 yard line. And
what inning are we in?
Yeah, I don't know. Tony has not given us the baseball comparison yet.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
So I believe Tony's explanation was that he had to fly to Jacksonville for something for Jaguars opening day, and that was the explanation.
Right. Because the NFL season is kicking off this weekend.
So yeah. All right. Let's go to forum.postwrestling.com.
Okay, we're going to start off with Andrew from Cape Breton. One of the criticisms I hear about AEW is it lacks an identity compared to WWE, and tonight and the past few months of television proved that is not the case. AEW is a mix of all styles in wrestling, from comedy with the Outrunners, MXM, and Orange Cassidy, to technical wrestling clinics, to crazy high-flying with Pac and Ospreay, to incredibly visceral and intense violence with Page and Swerve and Statlander. I think that's the identity it should go with. It's all wrestling you would want in one company. I mean, the counter to that would be, when you're trying to be everything, you aren't any one definable feature to anybody. I know that's simplifying things, but I think that is one thing that you look at, that to some, they would argue that there were instances where like an MXM collection would not have fit into the product at a certain point. And today, I think they're much more open to different acts like that. And with the Outrunners, I think like they have a uniqueness to them that the audience gets into in a limited form. If they were like all over these programs or pushed at a certain level, I think you'd get a rejection to that. But in their role, they're very much accepted in those roles.
Yeah, I was just trying to think how the street fight, how the lights out cage match would have been if like the Outrunners just suddenly came out
with Mansoor and Mason, and they go tip to tip with the hypodermic needles. Calls tonight one of the best shows AEW has ever put on, but that's just par for the course. Calls it an incredible show, just like All In. This was an all-timer.
Wow. Okay. And like to hear even that sort of praise, like coming off of All In, which I think had some similar sentiment, is very impressive.
These were two excellent shows that they put on in 2 weeks.
Let's go to Mark, who says, in quotes, "Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves." All right. I wonder if that's an original quote from him or if he's quoting somebody else.
Not an original, but yes.
Okay. Hangman and Swerve's epic blow-off as of today ended not with celebration, but the feeling of 2 men who pushed each other to unreasonable and uncomfortable limits, leaving neither a winner. The best feud in AEW's history concludes this another horrifying chapter. And what a way to cap off yet another incredible AEW pay-per-view. Some absolutely incredible moments and a great angle. As he cites Bryan's stunned selling of the uppercut from Claudio and Moxley using the plastic bag. Just phenomenal. A well-deserved sellout crowd. A perfect show.
Brian from New Jersey writes, thank goodness that main event ended. First, it got repetitive with the staple gun. Then it got convoluted for a period when the ref not allowing a chair to be used in this unsanctioned match so that Swerve could make a comeback. And then it just got uncomfortable with the use of a real cinder block and a syringe. Their Texas death match was considerably better than this. I enjoyed the event a lot overall. Like last year, a good meat and potatoes wrestling show after the massive spectacle of All In. Except this year, I thought All In was the stronger event. Ospreay and Pac was outstanding and my match of the night. Only other match that disappointed me was Moné and Shida, though I thought it was better than Moné against Baker in London. BCC angle was very surprising, but I could have done without the use of the plastic bag. Jim Ross sounded like he was shooting on the use of it in the angle. If that was Jim Ross's legitimate reaction, I thought he was great because he conveyed like this is disgusting, and I think he contributed to the tone I think you wanted for that type of angle that you were doing. So there you have it.
Thank you very much, Brian, for that. Let's go up next to Curtis from the 519. Wow, where do I even begin? On the same show that featured Pac and Ospreay putting on a match of the year candidate, a women's match of the year with Willow and Statlander, I found myself wincing and cringing more than once over the final 30-plus minutes. From Mox suffocating Bryan to whatever the hell that main event was, I loved every second of this pay-per-view. The opening MJF Garcia match was fantastic, though I would have had Garcia get the big win on pay-per-view. Pac and Ospreay put on a legitimate 5-star match and exceeded my expectations. The women's street fight was the perfect combination of fast-paced action and plunder, and the main event was hard to watch as somebody who hates needles. I found myself cringing as I watched a deranged Hangman stab him in the cheek. The chair shot was brutal and among one of the worst I've ever seen in wrestling. All of that being said, I was thoroughly entertained by the match and I'm loving the Hangman story arc. Tonight felt like a noticeably different production from AEW. A ton of unique camera shots like the over-the-tunnel shot for Hangman or the top of the cage shot during the main event. Overall, this pay-per-view has 2 thumbs up from me. Yeah, there were some maybe new creative uses of the jib. So
they were doing like the pan around the ring that stood out to me. Yeah, there did seem to be some like differences just in certain approaches.
Can we call this the Lee Fitting effect? I mean, not that he's in direct control.
This is the Mike Mansouri effect.
Oh, sure. But I mean, the fact that like maybe I think people are now praising WWE production to the point where maybe in AEW feels like it also has to, step up its game or be
what if the pay-per-view ends with people's exits from the arena?
What is that? What's that?
We always see the arrivals. Are we? What if we want to make sure they get home safely?
I think sometimes you get that in the press conference post shows, don't you?
In the AEW ones?
No, the WWE ones.
Yeah, you get some of them exiting and shots of them backstage after. Last word goes to Jordan from the Bronx. That's the damnedest AEW pay-per-view I've ever seen. Despite the short turnaround from All In, I knew that these matches would deliver. Every match rose to a peak that I couldn't imagine. A broken neck, a match of the year candidate, an impromptu dog collar match, a suffocation, and a syringe, all on one show. Amazing. Garcia and Willow's hardened characters felt special. Ospreay solidified wrestler of the year in my book with that superb performance. It's amazing seeing how far all 3 of them have come over the years. The only match that felt off was Mercedes and Shida, and only for the ending. Things felt like they were clicking until what looked like a stiff knee put the match in a weird spot. The moneymaker just doesn't look good. It's time to scrap it as a finisher. A show like that is the reason why I love wrestling today. We're all weirdos for watching this in the first place, but AEW seems to tap into the weirdest places that wrestling can go and make it entertaining. Where else would you see simulated crimes being committed openly and unapologetically like this? A mob hit with a suffocation, arson as revenge for a B&E, former best friends fighting to the death, then 2 Brits casually having a match of the year. Easily a 9 out of 10 show. I'm only curious what is needed for Jordan to make it a 10 out of 10. I guess it would have been a moneymaker hitting it precisely.
Moneymaker took it down one.
Yeah, this is a wonderful entertainment vehicle where you can have a mob hit with a suffocation, arson as revenge. Anyway, great piece of feedback from Jordan.
We've had a couple. Actually, several. I would say really good pay-per-view level events from both WWE, include the I guess the Takeover show if you want to include that, and both of AEW shows over these past few weeks. So, yeah, wrestling's really good right now.
And next weekend it's UFC at the Sphere in Las Vegas, which is one UFC show I imagine you are at least going to sample something of.
I just want to see.
I just want to see the production of it. Like I don't think you're going to get the full experience without being there, but I think to me the production it's an awesome main event that they have, but it's to me the selling feature is it's a UFC event at the Sphere.
Sure, yeah. You think we'll get what is it, a steady cam shot ringside throughout the whole thing?
I don't know what you're going to get. I have absolutely no idea, but they have put over $20 million into this. So we're going to see what that translates to on screen. That's going to be something else. But that'll be next weekend. Thanks to everyone for staying up late with us and checking out our All Out review. Wei and I are back on Monday night following Rewind to Raw. And if you want to support us, you can jump on board the Post Wrestling Cafe at postwrestlingcafe.com. We come at you every single week with Rewind to SmackDown on Friday nights, Collision Course each Saturday, and later on this week, Wei and I are going to get together in person for our latest installment of Talk, where we are going to sit down and we're going to chat about life, this site, and syringes. We're going to go through all of these topics.
John is going to hit me with an unprotected chair shot as he promised on this podcast. So
yes. I'm going to prove to Wei that there's no such thing as a gimmick chair shot.
I will talk half concussed with a needle in my mouth.
I'll take the needle to even it out.
Gotcha.
But those are the things you can look forward to. And Wei's going to be a busy man this week because he will be on with Rich Fan and WH Park on the cafe to chat about Madam Web, which sounds like just a horrendous contribution to cinema.
Can I just take the chair shot instead of having to sit through Madam Web? I guess Madam Web is sort of the cinematic equivalent of a cinder block to my lower back.
Will this be your first viewing of the movie? Did you see it before?
Yes, it will be my first viewing.
Okay. Well, I cannot wait to hear these thoughts. So all of that can be found. And this month we will have lots of stuff coming your way on the cafe, including a upcoming Rewind Away covering Raw from December 6, 2004, a New Japan Destruction in Kobe review, and plenty more. MCU Later is going to be kicking off their look at Agatha All Along.
You got it.
Yes.
Pulled it out from the memory bank.
More alliteration. So there you have it. $6 a month gets you access to all of our bonus content, and it helps support the Post Wrestling site as well.
And shows like this ad free. So if you're sick of going through the YouTube ads or going through the podcast ads, well, give us a little bit of support, and you'll get these shows completely ad free.
Yes. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll speak with you Monday night following Raw.